In the scriptural justice system, the highest of the high, the Most High, Yah, is the judge and jury, and the seed of Israel are his children. These are their stories. Season 1, Episode 1, Out of the Black Land. The office is stark, evidence boxes stacked high. Maps of ancient trade routes cover the walls. A timeline spans an entire wall, 1446 BCE to present. Detective Sarah Banks, 40s sharp, former archaeology professor, stands at a murder board covered with images, ancient Egyptian art, mummy reconstructions, DNA charts. Her partner, Detective Marcus Chen, 30s, skeptical by the book, walks in holding coffee. Another ancient cold case. Sarah, we've got actual crimes from this century. Banks. This is a crime. The biggest identity theft in human history. She slaps a photo on the board, a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus. 1,500 years of fraud. And it starts here. She taps another photo, the pyramids. Chen, Egypt. What about it, Banks? Not what. Who? We're going to prove who the Hebrews really were, and we're starting with a baby in a basket. Moses? The most famous rescue story ever told, and the biggest clue everyone missed. Conference room, day. The team assembles, Banks clicks a remote, a projection appears, Pharaoh's daughter finding baby Moses in the Nile. Banks, Exodus chapter 2, Hebrew baby, death sentence from Pharaoh, mother puts him in a basket, Pharaoh's daughter finds him, raises him as her own. Dr. Amara Oka, 30s, forensic historian, Nigerian British accent, leans forward. Okafor, the survival test. Exactly. Chen, you're Pharaoh. It's 1500 BCE Egypt. You've ordered every Hebrew baby boy drowned in the Nile. Your daughter brings you a baby she found in that same river. Banks holds up 2 dolls, one with dark brown skin, one pale white. Which baby lives? That's which baby lives? Chen points to the brown-skinned doll, the one who looks Egyptian. Bingo. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house for 40 years. He looked like them, talked like them, was them until he chose his people. Riley Thompson, DNA specialist, caffeinated energy, spins his laptop around. Riley. And we can prove what them looked like. Ancient Egyptian DNA Studies, 2017, published in Nature Communications. Analysed 93 mummies spanning 1400 years. Banks. Riley, indigenous Northeast Africans. Modern Egyptians have European and Middle Eastern admixture from later invasions, Arab, Greek, Roman. But ancient Egyptians? Black Africans. Okafor, their own art, confirms it. Temple walls at Beit El Wali, Abu Simbel, Karnak. Egyptians painted themselves reddish-brown. They painted Nubians to the south darker. Libyans and Asiatics lighter. She projects images of ancient Egyptian art. They knew the difference. They painted what they saw. They were brown to black African people. Okay, so ancient Egyptians were black, but the Hebrews were the same people. Not the same nation, but the same blood. Abraham came from Ur, settled in Canaan, went down to Egypt during famine. Genesis 12, Genesis 46. His descendants multiplied in Egypt for 430 years, intermarried, had children. Riley Joseph married an Egyptian woman, Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, Genesis 41-45. Their kids were Ephraim and Manasseh, 2 of the 12 tribes. So Hebrew and Egyptian bloodlines mixed. Banks heavily. By the time of Exodus, you couldn't tell them apart by looking. That's why Moses could pass. That's why when he killed the Egyptian taskmaster and fled, he blended into Midian, another African-Arabian region. Okafor, 40 years later, when Moses returns, Aaron has to confirm his identity with signs and wonders. His own people didn't recognize him by sight after he'd been gone. Chen, because they all looked alike. Banks, same African bloodline, different nation. The Hebrews weren't white people enslaved by black Egyptians. They were a Hebrew-speaking African people enslaved by an Egyptian-speaking African people. Silence. So why does every painting, every movie, every Sunday school book show Moses as white? That's the crime we're investigating. Banks and Okafor stand over a table covered with Renaissance paintings, Michelangelo's Moses, countless European depictions of Exodus. Okafor, 15th century, European Renaissance. Artists painted biblical figures as Italian, German, Dutch. Made sense. They painted what they knew. Banks. When did it become deliberate fraud? Okafor, when Europe colonized Africa, 1600s onward. You can't enslave people and call them cursed subhuman, then admit that Moses, David, Solomon and Christ looked like them. She pulls out a document, a slave auction notice from 1750. You need them to believe God's chosen people were white. That whiteness equals divinity. That blackness equals curse. Banks psychological warfare. Okafor for 500 years and counting. Riley bursts in. Riley, you need to see this. He pulls up an image, ancient Egyptian statue, clearly African features. Sphinx. Multiple studies suggest the face shows African features, broad nose, full lips. But here's the kicker. He shows a photo from 1798. Napoleon's troops in Egypt. Witnesses reported they shot the nose off the Sphinx with cannons. Banks, why? Riley, why do you think? Erase the African features, make it ambiguous, easier to claim Egypt for white civilization. That's conspiracy theory territory. Is it? Pull up the British Museum's Egyptian collection. Riley types. Images flood the screen. Thousands of artifacts, stolen during colonization, housed in European museums, described in catalogues as ancient civilization, never as African civilization. Okafor, meanwhile, they taught the world that Africa had no history, no culture, no greatness, just savages waiting to be civilized. Chen, while hiding the fact that Egypt, the greatest ancient civilization, was Africa. Banks, and the Hebrews who left Egypt were African too. Interrogation room. Day. Banks sits across from Professor William Cross, 60s, white, Ivy League credentials dripping off him, a prominent biblical historian. Banks, Professor Cross, you've written 12 books on Exodus. 14, actually. Not one mentions that ancient Egyptians were black Africans. The term black is anachronistic. Ancient peoples didn't think in modern racial categories, but they had eyes and melanin. Answer the question, were ancient Egyptians African people with brown to black skin? Cross, Egypt is in Africa, yes, but North Africa is distinct from sub-Saharan. Banks, that's a modern distinction created by colonizers. Upper Egypt, where the earliest dynasties originated, that's south, closer to Nubia, modern Sudan. Black African territory. She slides a photo across. Nama Palette, 3100 BCE. First pharaoh. African features. You can't claim Egypt and erase Africa. Cross detective. I don't appreciate the implication. Here's what I appreciate. Facts. Moses was raised as Egyptian royalty. To survive that, he had to look Egyptian. You agree? Cross. Likely yes. Banks and Egyptians were indigenous Northeast Africans with brown to black skin. You agree? It's more complex than yes or no. Yes. So Moses was a black African man. He was Hebrew. A Hebrew black African man, just like Abraham's grandson Joseph, who also blended into Egyptian society so well he became second in command of the nation. You're trying to make this about race, Banks. I'm making it about truth. You wrote 14 books and never once told readers that the people in your Exodus story were black Africans. Why? Silence. Because if you did, people might ask the next question, where are those Hebrews now? Where did the black African Hebrews go? That's not my field. Banks, make it your field. Bullpen, night. The team regroups. Chen looks rattled. Chen, he actually admitted it. On record. Banks, they all do, eventually. The evidence is overwhelming. They just hope no one connects the dots. Okafor, so what's the next dot? Banks, Deuteronomy 28, the contract. Riley, contract? Banks, God made a covenant with the Hebrews. Blessings if they obeyed, curses if they didn't. Specific detailed curses. She writes on the board. Scattered to all nations, enslaved, sold, ships, children taken, no rest. We're going to follow those curses through history like a trail of blood. And at the end, we'll find out who the real Hebrews are today. Chen, you already know, don't you? Banks looks at the board, at the timeline stretching from ancient Egypt to the present, at the ships, at the auction blocks, at the prison statistics. Yeah, I know, but we need to prove it. Every single step. She turns to the team. Banks. Episode 2, we track them after 70 AD, when Rome destroyed Jerusalem and scattered them. Where did they go? Into Africa, and we're going to follow them. Fade to black, end of episode 1, done.